Hello and welcome aboard to India's very first aviation podcast, Airworthy Talks by Udaan Aviation Academy. I'm your host, Subhashis Modak, aviation trainer by profession and sustainability educator at heart. Me and my team at Udaan Aviation Academy are on the mission of trimming down the industry academia gap in the aviation sector. At Udaan, we offer everything ranging from diverse upskilling courses to virtual workshops and from aviation news to podcasts. For opening the first episode of Airworthy Talks, we are here with the theme Crafting Careers in Aerospace Engineering. We have with us Mr. Arjun Vijayanarayanan, Aircraft Certification and Integration Engineer at VISAT. He is also a technical advisor to plethora of aviation companies across different technical disciplines. Now, Arjun is also an excellent mentor to budding aviation professionals and is actively engaged with Dweebs Global and Space Kids India to nourish the young minds in the field of aerospace and aviation. Today, Arjun will be talking us through the million-dollar question on how someone can craft an airworthy career in the field of aerospace engineering. Arjun, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Subhashis. I am really looking forward to this podcast. Thank you so much for the invite and the introduction.
Thank you. Thank you, Arjun. We are glad to have you with us. And obviously, it's the aviation fraternity as well, which is always caught in this dilemma as to, what are the, or how aviation industry works on a day-to-day basis. Who are the behind the scenes heroes who are making this industry work 24/7. And there is one of this job which comes to everyone's mind is aerospace engineering. And we have got the likes of Elon Musk taking it till the level of Mars and beyond. So definitely this is something which is definitely on the minds of our young AV geeks, and they would want to sort of learn more from you as to what it is. So my first question to you is, what is the day in the life of an Arjun like? Or what is the day in the life of an aerospace engineer generally is?
So I'll probably start off with my job role, which is the Aircraft Certification and Integration Engineer. And what I do in Viasat is we provide satellite communications and in-flight entertainment to airlines in the aeronautical industry. So what I do here is I work as a project engineer, which means that I would be interacting with customers who wants our system to be integrated on their aircraft. I would be working with suppliers who would be supplying products to Viasat. I'll be working with FAA to make sure the certification of our product goes on smoothly, and I make sure that all the requirements of FAA are being met. And I also work with different engineering teams, whether it's mechanical engineering, structural engineering, aerodynamics engineering, and making sure that the project as a whole is being considered and is being worked towards in a way that it's happening within the budget and scope of the project, but it's also happening with the way the customer requirements are being met. So I would look at myself as working a project completely with this holistic view in mind. And that's predominantly what I do as a aerospace engineer, I would say, for one half of the day, 8 hours during my work. And then in the evenings, I usually set up my day with mentoring, like you mentioned, and that is usually my most satisfactory part of the day because I interact with students, I interact with other organizations, I learn about new technologies, because to be a mentor, it's not only about you teaching someone, but it's also you learning from them, because to be a good mentor, you need to learn a lot to be updated with the latest trends and technology so that you can provide updated information to your mentees. So my day in my life would go my professional job, and then my my side job, I would say, or the job which gives me most satisfaction, which is mentoring students.
Great, great. And as I'm just listening to you, I'm getting this in both the half of your professional life and something which you love to do. In both of these aspects, there is this one common element, which is the aviation industry.
Absolutely.
And obviously, aircrafts is something which drives this industry 24 into 7, 365 days a week. So we always have a passion to our field of expertise or the field in which we are working. So my sort of question to you is, and I'm sure our listeners will have the same thing, as to what fascinates you more about aircrafts. What was that moment in your life where you thought, oh, this is the field which I need to marry to, and this is the field which I would live with the rest of my life?
Absolutely. So my fascination for this industry started in seventh grade when I had my first experience on a flight going from India to Singapore. And I was just blown away with just the whole experience of you being 40,000 feet high in the air, and things just happen like on ground with you getting your food and everything, and aircraft, and you don't even know that the aircraft is going through Mach point 0.9 and you don't feel anything inside, and there you are 2 3 hours later in some other land. And so that was but the biggest fascination came when I was taken to a NASA exhibition in Singapore, and I sat through my first flight simulation experience, a 4D experience where they make you sit in some kind of a cabin and then you have a visual on, and you just, I don't know, it still gives me goosebumps today when I think about, what I went through in my seventh grade. And just right that day, I was like, okay, here's what I am going to do in my life. Combine that with a viewing of the movie Top Gun, and then it just like, okay, here's what I am going to do in my life, being in the aerospace industry. Once you had that, I had a big thing about, because aerospace is, you can also talk about the space industry with rockets and that kind of a fascination, and the aeronautical industry, we're working with aircraft and working on the aircraft side. So I'm fascinated towards both, where in my mentorship I keep, I work with the like the space related organizations, and I keep myself updated with that, and so that I can quench my thirst on the space side of the industry. And then where I work for is the aeronautical industry, where I work with aircraft. The thing that which kept my fascination going is while I was studying aerospace engineering, a friend of mine called me for a ride on a Cessna where I was the co-pilot, and looking at the sun from an altitude, looking at a rain from altitude, you experience rain on the ground, but then when you see rain clouds and how rain occurs from the clouds itself or from above the clouds itself, is just I can't explain that in words, the beauty of it. Every time I'm up in the air with a friend of mine on the pilot seat, just looking at the world from top, you are on top, right? So that this just keeps my fascination going. And every time, even now, when an aircraft just flies over, I can't help myself from just looking up and thinking about my first journey in a flight and what I do and how thankful I am to be in this industry and be fascinated in this industry. This just keeps my fascination going, right? And my first job was working at Boeing, and you would have hundreds of aircraft parked with different liveries and different, supply for different customers. And every day I would pass through this parking lot just to see hundreds of aircraft parked and taking on and taking off and landing, and it was just a fantastic sight to be at. And that's one side of the industry. The other side, I was also fortunate enough to work close to a military base where you see fighter jets taking off and doing all kinds of aerobatic things in the air just because they can. And I can't help myself then being just fascinated with this industry and what they do. And I'm very thankful to be in this industry, and just keeps my fascination going. I can still feel goosebumps.
Right, right. So it's all in the joy of flying and feeling that you are airborne. And
Yes.
it's a very common saying in our industry is that for rest of the people, they say sky is the limit. But for people who love aviation, that is where our home is.
Absolutely. And it makes for a connected world, right? You may be in different parts of the world, but then when you think about it, you're just a few hours away. And aviation makes it happen.
So when we look at aviation industry from a general perspective, or as you were mentioning the movie Top Gun, and in general, when people think about aviation industry, they think about two important characters, okay, or two important job roles, I should call them, as one being pilots and second one being cabin crews. So you see them across Instagram stories flying from one part of the planet Earth to the other part, and those cockpit screenshots which they take, and then it all goes viral. But there is also an army of experts who are working behind the scenes 24 into 7 to run this beautiful world of aviation industry. So can you sort of talk us through as to what are the different job roles apart from these pilot and cabin crew roles which are out there?
Absolutely, right. Right. They get all the credits in a photo. You have a cool pilot with his uniform and their aviator glasses on, and they get all the media credits and things like that. But you're right. There is a big army of engineering and other job roles which make an aircraft happen, which make a pilot feel safe in what they're flying. Absolutely. And so some of those aircraft roles or engineering roles that make it happen, we talk about avionics engineering, we can talk about aerodynamics engineering, structural engineering, mechanical engineering, quality engineering, human factors engineering, to make sure the pilots feel safe within a cockpit and they're given enough training and user experience. Flight simulation, that's human factors experience, that's human factors engineering playing a huge role. Or when you even talk about putting the aircraft together, right, you need tools. Tooling engineering is also a big industry that a lot of people don't talk about. Software engineering these days, with everything's going software. And so, having that experience in software engineering or data science is getting huge these days. Mechatronics, which is a combination between mechanical and electronics engineering, is huge. Um, and then you can talk about certification engineering, where, hey, you need to certify this aircraft to make sure it's airworthy and it's following all the regulations. So certification engineering is huge. Manufacturing engineering, and people always talk about how to make an aircraft light and things like that these days. So materials engineering, composite engineering is huge these days. So if you think about it, on the engineering side, with there's just so much of engineering roles that people can study and wish to be a part of the aviation industry. It's not just you being an aerospace engineer and or aviation engineer. You can still study for other engineering roles and still be a part of the aviation industry or the aeronautical industry or the aerospace industry and provide a huge contribution, right? And then there are other things that which are probably not engineering, but then if you think about it, documentation, technical publications is a huge role to play. Interior design, people don't think about interior design, but these days interior design, because that's where customers interface with the aircraft, right? So interior design is huge. Cabinet making, woodworking, and upholstery, leather making, and things like that there is a huge things to play. And like you mentioned, maintenance is a huge thing that we can talk about. And people who sell these aircraft, right? Sales, marketing, accounting. So all of this puts together makes this industry happen. And you are absolutely right that instead of just thinking about pilots and cabin crew, of course, those are the face of the aircraft itself, or a face of the company or an OEM for the customer, absolutely. But there are so much happening in the scenes, and all of it together makes it what industry going, and it's beautiful how everything comes together in this industry.
Right. So there is this plethora of engineering job roles which are available out there, which you talked us through. So right from systems to maintenance to software to manufacturing and so on and so forth. But the thing is, whenever you think from a student side, the second question which comes to every student mind is, let's say if I do this X engineering or Y engineering, what kind of job opportunities which I'm going to get in this aviation industry if I become, let's say, an aerospace engineer or an aircraft maintenance engineer or an aircraft maintenance technician to that regards, what kind of job opportunities I'm looking at if I end up, doing a course on one? What are the job opportunities out there?
So depending on like what your passion is, right? Like so, my passion is to be amongst this aviation industry, but you have sub passions, right? So even though your passion can be in being in the aerospace industry, you can contribute to the industry because you may be fascinated by creating software. So you can be a software engineer. You may be fascinated with human system interaction, which is a huge thing that these days, with you are a UX designer, a UI designer, or how is that this works. So you can be that electrical engineering, electronics engineer, because these days when you see a traditional cockpit going from all kinds of switches to touchscreens and pilotless systems and autopilots and things like that, that's where the future is taking us. Then you would have to have that kind of, if you have expertise in electronics engineering, different kinds of avionics engineering, software engineers, these are all kinds of engineers which are taking on a different kind of role when you go from a traditional cockpit or a traditional aircraft to a future aircraft which you don't have a pilot. Things are just different with working virtual reality and stuff these days that they talk about, where pilots are wearing some virtual reality goggles, and whatever a cockpit display used to do, now your glasses, virtual reality glasses does, right? So it's absolutely amazing how the industry is transitioning, and it's one of the best times to be in this industry to witness this transition from traditional to future, right? So when you think about it, you have those kinds of opportunities where if you are fascinated by virtual reality, come into it with that experience, but you can still work for the aerospace industry. And EWIS, which is electrical wiring and interconnection systems, these days with things going more from a mechanical based aircraft to an electrical and software based aircraft, electrical wiring interconnection systems is having a huge part to play in this industry. So if you like electrical engineering and if you want your specialty be in EWIS, you can get into that. The other thing with the trend going from a traditional aircraft to an future aircraft with all kinds of fascinating technologies is certification. How is certification changing from certifying a traditional aircraft to an aircraft which just works on software and electricity, or hydrogen and things like, or a nuclear reaction and things like that, right? So certification should also completely change. And the beauty of this is, with all of this changing, education academies or educational, the way education is taught should also change to cater towards the future. Because there is, I attend some webinars where experts were talking about a dearth on avionics technicians or maintenance technicians who, if they are not trained properly, they cannot work on a next generation aircraft, right? So the training should also change accordingly. So when we talk about a job opportunity now versus a job opportunity later, some of the jobs which are now, of course, are going to be in the future, but how it is done is going to be different. So educational institutions should change their curriculums accordingly. Flight simulations should change their curriculum accordingly. Suppliers should change their what they offer accordingly. So as and when you keep yourself updated with what is the aviation industry going towards, the job opportunities also change, right? There is no way that artificial intelligence and when people talk about AI and machine learning taking the traditional job, I don't think it's going to take their jobs away. It's just going to make them work differently. And so you need to be updated with what it is and take training programs, like you mentioned, on how to keep one still valid in a future market, and take training and certification programs accordingly. And even, like, the organizations like your organization should make sure that next generation kind of courses are given to make sure that even your organization keeps adding value like it is doing right now, and keeps going in the future.
Right, absolutely right. So I think I totally agree with what you have said out here is that as the technology is getting updated day by day, we as an individual, someone who wants to join the industry or already is in the industry, needs to constantly keep them updated as well.
Yes,
Because if we don't catch up, we will ourselves become obsolete.
it's very important these days, especially to deviate from the regular thought process of I did a degree and I can work in this industry for 30 years. I think those days are gone now, where every 5 years or every year these days technologies are changing. So one has to continue to be a student and keep updating themselves to still keep relevant in this industry going forward. You are absolutely right in that.
Right. I'm talking about, the importance of how the transition is taking place from men to sort of machine. Can you sort of talk us through how the, men and machine relationship is evolving in the field of aviation? Because let me sort of tell you from an example. So the aircrafts which were there in the 1970s, let's say Boeing 707, it had a four crew member. So you have the navigator, the flight engineer, along with your set of pilots. Now, job roles like navigator and a flight engineers, we don't see anywhere them close to the cockpit while the aircraft is flying. So what is that is changing in this, men and machine relation in aviation industry?
Absolutely. So, with the next generation of aircraft coming in, or even with, when we deviate from a Boeing 707 to a 787 or an Airbus 321 Neo, you're already moving from a traditional mechanical based aircraft to an electric based or a hybrid based aircraft. And that's where people are talking about hydrogen based aircraft these days, with companies going that way. So, when we move from mechanical based to reducing mechanical processes in the aircraft to make the aircraft more lighter, or to make the aircraft better with the next generation of technologies, human factors and how humans interact with an aircraft is absolutely important. Just giving you a common example. Even though ATMs would have come, you still know a lot of people who would go to the bank to deposit their checks and with a bank teller, and because that's how they feel comfortable talking human to human, rather than just, clicking a photo of their check and there you go, your money is already there. And I don't know how many people even use checks these days, right? So when technology is evolving, we also have to think about, are humans comfortable with no pilot in the cockpit? In case emergency situation happens, is humanity ready to be like, oh man, like there is no pilot in the cockpit. What happens if an emergency happened? Would I die right here? So everything at the end of the day, the like the aircraft equipment manufacturer can come up with all kinds of technology, but if humans as customers are not ready to use their aircraft without a pilot, then they're not going anywhere, right? You're not going to sell anything at this point. So there is a big portion of human interaction with the system, which is absolutely important, right? When you think about, when I used to work for Gulfstream Aerospace, I saw the evolution from a cockpit having all kinds of switches to suddenly when I go into a G500, G600, or G700, all you see is 5 touchscreens. No switches anywhere, nothing, and you have just touchscreens all over the place. And even, for an engineer like myself, it took some time to understand what is this touchscreen doing, how am I interacting with it, and things like that, right? So when you go from that, yeah, and so that's, I'm not even a pilot. So imagine a pilot who has to go through from an aged pilot, right? That have been in the piloting industry for 50 years or 40 years. And now they suddenly have to adapt from traditional switches to touchscreens. And of course, they are going to be completely vary, and they're going to doubt the system completely on what is this, like how do I, and this doesn't give me anything, right? When you touch a screen, if the screen gives you some tactical response that you have indeed touched it, it is something. But then when you just touch a screen and it doesn't give you any kind of response, then you don't know if you pressed it, if you don't know what is happening, right? So that confidence in a system, trust in automation, confidence in a system, that's very important to be understood. And also, if the system is going to take most of your responsibilities and you're not doing anything at this point, then that takes away job satisfaction from you, because you are proud to fly this aircraft and you are doing all of these things. Now, when you don't do much of it, when the aircraft is doing it, job satisfaction also becomes a big thing, or being bored in what you do is also a big thing, right? So when you think about it from this perspective, yes, it is beautiful what kind of technologies are happening, but then it's also very important to make sure that there is a human in this loop using this system. There is a human machine interaction, and we need to absolutely make sure when a design is being done, you incorporate the pilots in the entire design journey, so that when they go into the simulator, they are completely aware of what has gone through. I'll give you an example with the Elon Musk's Crew Dragon module. The entire design with complete touchscreens and stuff, the astronauts were involved right from day one to the nth day, or the day with which this was released. So this is how it has to be, where you need to make sure the human is interacting as and when this technology is also being developed, because we as humans need to be careful or comfortable with what we are doing. And the other one is when you come to user interface. This is not the pilots, but the customers are getting user or interfacing with the system now. You also need to make sure that the customers are being comfortable with what it is that they are using, right? So when you go from a traditional in-flight entertainment back, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, but then now when you go sit in the cabin, you have a screen right in front of you, and it's like an iPad. You can do anything with it. You can watch movies, stream movies. And so all of that has a big value in how humans interact with the system. And then now when I talk about, but everything that I've spoken about is customer facing. When you think about what this means to the back end, like how engineers are developing these, how certification people are developing these, it just needs a whole new plethora of courses that educational institutions has to bring in, training that design engineers have to go through, training that certification engineers have to go through, right? Because at some point they had, when you press a switch, this happened, and here are your wires, and certification engineers were going to do something. Now, when you're talking about no wires, and it's just some software, doing some embedded chips doing the work, I go through this where it's like, how am I certifying this? When you go from hardware, software to combining together to create a thing called firmware, and everything just happens within a chip, they get confused on what am I certifying, and you don't go through a good certification process, right? So there is a part of human system interaction on the customer facing end, but then there is so much on the back end on design engineers coming up with these systems, training, which is huge, training labs, certification engineers being able to certify this, quality inspectors being, what is quality here? So the definition of what you do is also changing, and all of that needs to be taken into consideration when we go from a traditional aircraft to a future aircraft, to make sure that everyone's comfortable doing what they're doing, right? A maintenance technician may be just happy with putting in an avionics box there and configuring something versus putting in a chip there or whatever it is, right? So everyone's job role is changing at this point, and how every person, irrespective of job you do, interacting with their part of the system is absolutely changing. You're right. And we need to make sure that curriculums and certifications and trainings and simulators all have to change in a way that this new technology is being possible and being comfortable transition as well.
You have rightly said this, that the transfer which is happening from human being at the core decision making of systems around it, to now a place where systems are actually, or there is a notion which is out there in people's mind that systems will be driving systems. How human will still be a part of it, particularly during those critical decision making phases of landings and takeoff, is something which is important to sort of look into. And to all our listeners as well, it is important that while you sort of look into the aviation industry, you have to keep these points in mind, where if you are looking at designing a system, the system is the heart, but the human is still the soul of it. The combination of men and machines still going forward, despite of a lot of technology coming in and changing the entire scenario, that still has to be there, right?
Absolutely. That's why I mentioned this view called holistic view. When you think about holistic systems thinking, humans are always going to be at the core of it, because machines are not going to be consuming machines. Humans are going to be interacting with the machines, or humans are going to be creating a system which interacts with humans or machines anyway. So we need to make sure that humans are always, they are going to be in the loop, and that view of systems taking on and things like that, to me that's too far-fetched, because somebody has to be creating that system and that human brain, and finally we need to be consuming it. So humans are always going to be in the center of everything, and we need to make sure we design and train everyone in a way that they not only consider technical side of systems, but they also consider the human side of systems as well.
So Arjun, in the all the talks what we are having, what are the key points which our listeners can sort of take if they want to become an aerospace engineer? Like, what are the key ingredients which they should sort of have in them or develop in them to become an aerospace engineer?
First off, I would start off with good education. Make sure that you are educated in a way that your qualities are marketable or valid now, also later. So you can go through a traditional educational system, make yourself completely solid in what it is that you want to do, whether it's in school, being with maths, physics, chemistry. I'm just talking about the engineering roles. I'm sure there are other roles going forward. And then when you come to the uh, school, make sure that even though my passion is to be in the aerodynamics world, but still make sure that you learn about everything else as well, because you have to interact with everyone else and you need to be understanding their job roles as well. So solid education and a continuing education is very important. Just because you have a master's or just because you have a bachelor's doesn't mean that you are going to be valid or relevant later. So keep making sure that you go through certification programs and you get updated with the latest trends and technologies, so that quench that thirst of knowledge has to continue to be there going forward. The other one I would say is to make sure that you become hands-on with with what you do. Go to maker spaces or start getting your hands dirty with how systems work, how things work. And again, to have that knowledge about when you break through this chip, how chips work together, how does this system work together, how does a satcom antenna work. Make sure that you get hands-on experience in a lot of things, because theory can only do so much. Until you go hands-on, you don't know the nuances of how to apply that theory. So it's very important to get hands-on, create, like, develop codes, program codes if you are into software and programming, and making sure things happen, because it's another way of being hands-on. So I would do those. Another one is I would also take people as mentors in this field, to make sure that you are always going in the right direction, or you get counseling with respect to what it is needed in the future to make yourself relevant in the future, and what kind, like, how do you shape your career, right? So some kind of a mentor who's already done that. Make sure that you talk and network to people. These days networking is huge in this context. To make sure you are updated with the latest trends and technologies. And the other one, which is important, is no one wants to, it doesn't matter how technically sound you are, no one would want to work with not if you're not a good person, right? So on the side, make sure that you also develop interpersonal skills, leadership skills, communication skills, because at the end of the day, you will be working with someone else or your boss, and you need to be making sure that you have the right qualities in you to be a good person and to be a good employee or a good leader, anything it may be. So don't only focus on the technical side of everything, also focus on yourself, to be a good person, to be a good communicator, to be a good leader, and start developing all those interpersonal or soft skills, like they would say, and make sure. Uh, I think with this is what I would say with respect to equipping yourself for the future. As long as you're always the student of the industry, you are going to keep learning, and you will do wonders in the world. For me, especially, I'm India has a special place in my heart, so that having that patriotic fervor is huge for me. So giving back to India and making sure that I mentor, I talk with Indian organizations, I talk with Indian aviation, like, and just to satisfy my patriotic fervor in a way that in some small shape or way or form, I'm giving back to India. So that giving back to your country or giving back to your people is always important. And just make sure that as and when you grow in your career, you also give that opportunity to people who are following your path, and bring them up as well.
Absolutely right, Arjun, and I totally agree with every inch of it. Right from not only knowing what you are going to do, but knowing about the entire broader scenario of the industry. Second is, keeping yourself up to date. This is something which is definitely required. Third is, getting the right opinion from the people who have already been there, done that. And last but not the least, it's all about giving back to the society as well. You talked about patriotism, and giving back to India is what you love to do, and I see it every day. You doing something or other on the LinkedIn and trying to help people out, whether it is with a job role or whether it is with something else. So hats off to you on that. Talking about your patriotism with India, I'll be definitely asking you certain tough questions on this, which
Okay.
makes me take to the next round, which we call it as the rapid fire round with Arjun. So
Okay.
I'll be asking you certain questions and you have to choose either or. It cannot be both. Okay.
Okay.
So my first question to you is, which one will you choose out of these two aircraft manufacturers, Boeing or Airbus?
Airbus.
Okay. Which airline will you choose out of this, Delta or United?
Delta.
I'm sure that you are scared that United will drag you off the flight, so that's why it is Delta. Right. America or India as a country?
India, any day.
That's where the patriotism comes for the country. So I'm equally happy for that. The next is talking about a bit of engineering side of thing. There is this concept of a sharklet or raked wingtips. Which one will you go with for the wingtip vortices?
I would have to say it depends on the aircraft there.
Right, so that's a proper system engineer which we have out here. And last but not the least, where will we humans be colonizing first, Moon or Mars?
Let me say Mars, but my view on it is we can still make sure the Earth is a better place to live, and whatever it is that we can do with respect to making an Earth the better place to live, let's do that as well.
Right, absolutely right. And that is what the change is also seen in the industry, that a lot of things are happening on how aviation industry can be much more environmentally sustainable,
Yes.
and how we people in our day-to-day lives can also be sustainable in our own ways.
Everyone's responsibility to make sure we work in an environment friendly way, and giving back is not just a society or a nation, but we have the responsibility to give back to nature and Earth as well.
Absolutely right. And this is one of the initiatives which we do at our Udaan as well. We believe in this concept of triple bottom line concept of sustainability, whereby it's not only looking at the economic side, but also social and environmental side. So we do a lot of tree plantation initiatives as a part of our thing at Udaan out here. So yeah, if we all do our bit, we can definitely make the world a better place to live, and hopefully we don't have to migrate to Mars for sure.
Yes.
Right. Sure. Thank you, Arjun, for this wonderful session and enlightening our listeners on this careers in aerospace engineering. Thank you for your valuable time.
This has been a wonderful experience, and I would also like to thank you and your team. We've worked in the past together, and it has been a beautiful experience to work with your team. Just makes it easy, and I'm glad that you guys have taken the initiative to educate the Indian students with the industry, whether it's from the maintenance side or whether it's equipping them with various things that you teach. So kudos to what you guys do, and the best of luck to your academy, and keep going forward, and best of luck with your podcast initiatives as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Arjun, for your valuable time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening patiently. We hope this podcast have added value to your time with us. With a lot of great content on the lineup, be sure that you have already followed us. For more exciting content and groundbreaking certificate programs, head over to udanaviationacademy.com. Thank you.